Welcome to the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network, a modern, innovative multimedia platform broadcasting ideas and connecting minds. You are about to listen to the Cognition Podcast, a show that looks at humanity's role in the rapidly changing world of science and technology, with your hosts, Hutch and Len.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Cognition Podcast. As always, I am one of your co-hosts, Hutch. I am a innovation principal at Trace3 and also the author of the book, The Language of Deception, Weaponizing Next Generation AI.
And I am still Len No, technical evangelist for CyberArk, transhuman, and author of the now released book, Human Hacked, My Life and Lessons as the World's First Augmented Ethical Hacker. God, that is a mouthful.
Yeah, and the best part is the now released part. So that's actually what today's episode is about. We'll go through some news like we always do, but really the big focus is the exciting news that just a few days ago, Len's book did release, and it is available to get your hands on. So we're going to have a conversation, interview him. But before we do, we'll talk through a few interesting news stories that we saw over the past few weeks. We're going to start with looking at Google's new AI solution that actually was able to uncover the first fully identified AI O-Day vulnerability. We're going to talk about Robinhood's new interesting capability of being able to bet on futures contracts for the presidential election, and then also talk about a new semiconductor hydrogel that's biocompatible but allows you to also perform computing. And then from there, of course, jump into the most exciting news, which is Len's book. So with that, we'll go ahead and tackle this first one. So this was fascinating. So one of the differentiators that I've consistently heard whenever people talk about will cyber threat activity be automated or will AI ever be able to do the same things that a hacker does? Oftentimes the perspective is that they may be able to execute in the capacity of a script kiddie. They may be able to leverage different tools and the knowledge compressed into that model in order to execute those attacks, but they're never going to be able to write their own O-Days or identify zero-day vulnerabilities. Well, now we have that. So this was a large language model system that was made by Google. It was part of their Project Zero initiative, which the entire point of that initiative is identifying zero-day vulnerabilities in different software stacks. And of course, the project was called Big Sleep, but that was essentially just a large language model that they built with the intention of reviewing source code. So static analysis, but using a large language model to reflect on that in order to try to identify new and unknown zero-day vulnerabilities. And sure enough, they found one in SQLite, which SQLite is, I think a lot of people aren't aware of how pervasive SQLite is. So it is used kind of in R&D projects and for small scale projects, but also pretty much every single app that you have on your mobile phone, whether that is Android or iOS, is going to have some implementation of SQLite in it for managing the data for that app.
And the one thing that I find really amazing is that it took it this long. I really do. I mean, if you take a look at how LLMs have been used to just try and advance code security, we've been using them as code review for a long time now. But the fact that this is the first time they've done it in this way, it makes me think of two things. Number one being, this is really not going to work out well for us in the long run, especially when we've been relying on these to protect us. And happened with, oh my goodness, I just had the biggest brain fart in the world here. CrowdStrike.
Yep.
And number two is, if it's finding the 0 days, what is this going to do necessarily for the time from the exposure of a new CVE or 0 day to the actual weaponization and the production of usable, exploitable code?
Yep. I think it's just further accelerating that game of cat and mouse. I think that this will be used on both sides. You're going to have defenders that are trying to find vulnerabilities as soon as code is released using these capabilities. But also, to your point, the threat actors are going to be using this in order to try to uncover those secrets before the defenders do.
Well, let's take this one step further. If we expand this, now we actually have to take into consideration the fact that there could be adversarial nations and this is proving that this is weaponizable, and we're doing it in the confines of research. What does this say in terms of how we need to look at our own cyber defense, nationally as well as internationally?
Yep. And I think it's a safe bet to say that if this is happening in public research, it almost is certainly happening behind the curtains with governments and nation states. So.
And that's the part that you and I keep talking about, and I think is one of the great underlyings of this podcast is, how does this play into the future? I think, we all need to start looking at the overall security implications of but when it becomes publicly known that our adversaries are not playing by the exact same rule book that we are. You and your AI, man.
Hey, I didn't bring this upon us.
No, but out of the two of us, see, you're the AI guy. I'm the futurist guy. I want us all to live, and be able to, make cell phone calls with our brains and stuff. You're bringing on the overlords here.
It's all imploding. Yep. Okay. So this one I just thought was interesting. So, Robinhood is now letting you bet on the presidential election via futures contracts. Lynn, thoughts on this?
I'm sorry. I'm still old school, dude. If I'm going to be making bets on the election, I'm going to Vegas. This is like, I'm not from Texas, and I believe you're natively born here, right? Right, Hutch?
I am. Yep.
See, this will all make sense to our listeners in just a second. But as somebody that was not born here, and I'm going to offend a bunch of our Texas listeners right now, I made the fatal error of asking a Longhorn cattle rancher what they tasted like. So for those of you that don't live in the great state of Texas, number one, I'm sorry, because this is the greatest place in the world. But number two, Longhorn cattle are not to be eaten. They're traded like millionaires' baseball cards. Yep. This and playing in the futures market, this is like, in my opinion, the same thing. This is for like the people that are just like too hoity-toity to want to go to Vegas, enjoy a good time, catch Cirque du Soleil, make a bet on the election. This is for the people who are going to be like, I'm doing it the governmental way. It's just too like white collar for me, man. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you mentioned Texas, because Texas, traditionally platforms like this are not available in Texas because sports betting is illegal in the state of Texas. So it's interesting that this is now a thing accessible to, and I've already confirmed I can access it on Robinhood. I'm not going
to ask you how much money you've invested so far there, Hutch, but I hope it works out for you in the end.
Well, so I think what's interesting about this, though, is I have heard a lot of speculation as to whether or not this is a good indicator of, because we already know that polls have not done very well as kind of a leading indicator going into the last few elections and haven't been very reliable. So there's been some people that are speculating, well, are these futures contracts where you've got literally millions of contracts now? Are these an indicator of what direction the election is going to go? And I think there may be something to that. I think that it's also important to contextualize that, because there is kind of a very specific demographic that uses Robinhood.
I like where you're going with this, though, because I agree with you in turn. And we're not, the one thing I will say about this podcast to our listeners is you'll never hear me and Hutch get political on here. Nope, not going to happen. I voted for me for president this year, so God help you all if I win. But I to your point, I think looking at things like Vegas and the odds that they're going with are a better indication than what's going on in the media right now, because these are people that are very good at not losing money.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I love how you framed this, because I'm not a big gambler. I work too hard for my money to just, throw it away. I didn't know that sports gambling was illegal here in Texas. I don't gamble that much. But to see this as a federally backed way to gamble in a dry state, that is actually a pretty cool trick. And from a hacker's perspective, I love, you got to respect the play.
Yep, for sure. Well, yeah, and I guess presidential election doesn't fall into that sports betting space, or I don't know if there's. I'm sure they've had lawyers that looked at this before.
With the way that we like to go after people here in Texas, I guarantee you they know exactly what they're doing.
Yep. Interesting stuff.
Oh, and to all of those of you out there, we know, yes, this is actually being recorded November 4th. So I really hope that, we're all still here by the time this actually gets released, because God knows what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yep.
But this is amazing stuff. So, yeah, there is now a stretchable hydrogel conductor. This is absolutely phenomenal. As somebody who has multiple very rigid pieces of technology shoved in their body, this is something that I think, especially with, everything I've said about brain computer interfaces and the smart prosthetics, this is going to be a game changer. This is a flexible, stretchable, up to a 150% electrical conducting material. So, for all of you out there who are watching, let me find my camera again. This, which is very, very familiar for me to show the world, this is not what is coming. This thing.
So for anybody that's listening, he just showed his very, what did you say, like sand dollar size implant that's on his.
Actually, I was checking it out. It's actually just about the same size as an actual silver dollar.
Yeah.
So this is thin, and this has so much better electrical connectivity than anything that I currently have. And so just, go ahead.
What I thought that was interesting when I was looking at the article was they used the term biocompatible, which to me seems like, unlike, because I would imagine with any of your implants, any kind of
that's where I was going next.
Portions have to be encapsulated in special ways.
Everything that I have is encapsulated. There is nothing that I have that can be exposed to my body without potentially giving me heavy metal poisoning. So, and that is honestly one of the biggest issues when dealing with any type of technology that you're going to put inside the human body. When it comes to medical devices, pacemakers, stem cells, cochlear implants, any of it, they are completely encapsulated. And if that bioencapsulation starts to fail, it can cause immediate health damage to the person. This is not only bioconductible, it won't degrade, and its electrical connectivity is off the charts. So you don't have to encapsulate anything. And when it comes to dealing with brain computer interfaces, or I could actually see something like this being potentially used to correct nerve damage. That's where where my mind went. You can actually potentially, if you have a severed nerve, you could use something like this, or something that's based off of this type of technology to bridge those gaps.
Trigger those electrical signals.
Bingo.
No.
So, this is, I was reading something earlier today, and I basically just asked, in terms of medical advancements over the course of 2023 compared to all the years prior, they'll say sometimes that, we never move forward as a species or progress day by day. We will come up with some kind of an advancement that moves the species forward by 20 years or something. According to our new Lord and Master ChatGPT, the amount of medical advancements in 2023 has actually moved the needle forward for humanity almost 2,000 years. if we were actually looking at how day by day to get to where we are with the neurotechnology, things like this, the smart prosthetics. We're getting there faster than anybody could ever imagine.
Yeah, which is exciting and terrifying all at the same time. Now, I think the one question that I'd have when I look at something like this is, I guess one, since it's an R&D project, how expensive is it? Because that is going to factor in significantly to how usable this technology would be when it comes to manufacturing something like this, and then also kind of how scalable those are when we talk about like semiconductors, and the number of transistors that we're fitting on semiconductor technology now is absolutely insane, because we now have kind of transistors that are operating at nanometer scale. So I'm curious how that compares to, and of course, this is something you could iterate on and make more efficient over time. But
oh yeah, I think this is just the first iteration of this. But did you see also in an article where they said that this is also something they're considering using for the 3D printing of organs?
Oh no, I hadn't seen that, but that's fascinating, and it makes sense.
Yeah, too. Yeah. I mean, especially if you like a heart, something that needs the ability to, contract and things. If you could basically bioprint something like this, you could actually use the electrical charge to create, the palpitations needed to move blood from chamber to chamber.
Well, I did see an article just the other day that was saying that they were using 3D printing in order to create essentially like bioreplicas of blood vessels, so they could do basically cancer or tumor cancer research, or specifically brain cancer, by replicating kind of blood vessels in the brain with 3D printing. And the fact that we can now use 3D printing for that, and then to your point, if we can move even further into creating something that supports potential technological interfaces as well as serves its biological function, that's pretty crazy.
And if we want to take it one step further, we could realistically use stem cells with CRISPR-Cas9 to alter the genetic signatures, that you could literally 3D print your own heart if you have a brand new heart that genetically matches to you.
Yeah. Cool stuff. All right. Well,
I've been saying for a while now, man, there's going to come a day where organ donors are no longer needed, and you'll just basically grow your own replacement parts.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that is a capability that we desperately need, because I mean there are so many challenges around. Having had family members that required organ transplants, having the availability of those organs, and really having to hope and pray that they become available because of somebody else's misfortune, just so that somebody close to you can survive, is a really hard place to be in. So the idea of being able to not rely on somebody else passing at a correct timing to make those organs,
and much lower points in terms of rejection, because it will actually match your genetics. I think that's eventually where we need to get. It shouldn't have to be that, if you have the ability to clone your DNA, which we do, there's no reason that anybody should need to have to die for someone else to live due to an organ failure.
Yeah, that'll be an exciting future.
I told you the future does have some good stuff for us.
It does, every once in a while. Well, this makes a very good segue into our main segment, which is, of course, as I mentioned at the intro, the exciting news that Lynn's book, Human Hacked, is now available for the public to read. He's holding up a copy right there, and it looks awesome. If you haven't seen it, the cover looks amazing. It's available to go purchase out on Amazon or wherever you get your books, and definitely worth the read. But with that, wanted to dive in and Lynn just ask you a few questions about kind of the background of the book and what inspired it, and other questions about your journey within the book. So one of the things that really struck me about this book is that it really is beyond just the technology, which is absolutely fascinating. It's also your personal story of kind of coming into being and really making the transition from kind of the biker gang past and biker clubs, I think is the terminology you usually use, and kind of a black hat hacker type background to transitioning more into a advocate for cybersecurity and an ethical hacker that still uses this fascinating knowledge of technology, but uses it in a way in order to better inform the industry. So can you speak briefly to kind of that story that inspired this entire project and kind of how that factored into the inspiration of the book?
Well, you and I have known each other for quite a few years, and for those that may not know, I believe the first time we met was at HUSEC, wasn't it?
I think the first time we met actually was I was doing a podcast for my old company, and we had you
That's
come
right.
in for part of a red blue team thing, and we found out about your superpowers.
But I started doing the whole biohacker journey back in 2020. And I was going around, and you actually saw it, but the original presentation was actually called Biohacker, the Invisible Threat. And that's where I came out and I showed the first 3 attacks of leprosy, handshake, and flesh hook. And it was cool, but people just weren't biting at the time. They really weren't, I got really good crowds when I would give the presentation, but I don't think people were ready for it yet. We were still very much in that just getting into COVID, and, everybody was trying to figure out what the new normal was. So I think it was just really bad timing the first time around. And in terms of getting to here, I tried to, I had talked for a very long time about the idea of wanting to write a book. I mean, heck, everybody says, "Oh, I'm going to write a book someday." And, then those like you and I actually try it and go, "This was a dumb idea."
There were a lot of nights. Yeah.
And to be honest, dude, you were the one that actually inspired me to actually do it. I mean, you basically were that guy at the end of the bar who said, "Put up or shut up," because you had just written your book, The Language of Deception. And if you guys out there haven't checked that out, the dude found a way to turn and weaponize AI and go after PII in dating apps. Come on. Hutch is a beast. But check it out. And he actually, for all of you youngsters out there, he even gives you code in the back so you can go try it yourself. But he is not responsible for, how you use this. But no, you and I were talking, and I had thought about it, and my original plan was actually just to turn the Biohacker Invisible Threat talk and presentation into a book. That was all I figured I would do. And then you were so kind enough to actually introduce me to Jim Intel. Shout out to Jim over at Wiley and all of the crew that were there, Krista Weimer, and to all of the editors that I do not know your names personally, but that I had to actually approve those 300 commas because I really am terrible at grammar. I thank you all. But you were the one that kind of kicked me in the ass, because it was one of those, let's do it. And then when I actually met with the publisher and I was like, "Yeah, this is what I want to do," they were like, "That ain't the story." I was like, "Okay, what do you mean that ain't the story? That's the story I've been out here talking about for the last couple of years, and it's worked up until now." They were like, No. We want to know about you."
Yeah.
And which point it went, "Oh boy, I guess I'm the story." And I guess in order to tell somebody, how do you justify the idea of shoving 10 different implants in your body, you got to give them a little history.
Yeah. And I think they're right on that. I mean, I think what is really fascinating about this, I think the truth is that probably right now we are at a point in technology where there are not a ton of people that are doing what you're doing. In fact,
well, there's more than you think.
Yeah, I remember you've shown some metrics on that, but still, I think that for most people, understanding what that journey looks like to get to that point where you're like, I want to pursue this, both from kind of a technological perspective as well as the adversarial threat that you become out of that is really what is fascinating about this is the story of you. So I think they were spot on that, and I'm glad that they.
Yeah, I have nothing but respect for the people, and I know this is going to be kind of one of the weirdest shout outs that I'll probably ever give on this. And I'm not going to actually mention any groups by name, but one of the things that I want to say is thank you to my former club brothers. They didn't have to give me the opportunity to do this. I actually had to contact, the organizations that I was a part of and actually tell them, hey, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm going to say. And if there's any problem, let's talk it out. And, they could have told me, you can't even say anything. So I appreciate their understanding, and I got books heading to you guys, like I said I would. But no, my life in the club was a different life. Same guy, different life. Yeah. And I think doing and living that kind of an existence really gave me, like I said in the book, it gave me a very unique perspective on security or the lack thereof. Because a lot of the times it's not even when I was doing the stuff that I was doing, it was never 0 days. It was never, Ocean's 11. It never had to be, and that's the funny thing.
Delivery, right? It wasn't the actual attack. It was the fact that it was being delivered in a way that nobody else had done before.
Nope. And nobody was even looking for it. And that's one of the things that, when I talked to our publishers over at Wiley, they were like, well, what's the message you're trying to get out there? And I basically just boiled it down to the simple fact of we're here and we're not going anywhere. And you can't stop an attack if you don't know that it's even possible. So, the funny thing is, like I was saying earlier, there's between 60 to 80,000 individuals with my same capabilities walking around the planet right now. The main difference between me and them, I've gone so far as to not only document every single chip I have, I tell people where they are. I am like the dumbest cybersecurity person in that aspect. I've told everybody not only what technologies I have, I put bullseyes on my own body. So believe me, when we're at DEF CON next year, I'm going to wind up walking around in basically a full Faraday suit.
Yep, understandable. So one of the things that I thought was really interesting in the book is you do explore some of the legal gray areas within technology and kind of a lot of kind of where that intersects with privacy laws as well. And so I'm curious from your perspective, do you expect in the future that there may be more regulation related to augmentation of humans? And also, what is your perspective? Should there be regulation or should that be left entirely to the person?
Well, see, I if we're being dead honest, I see it from both sides, but the truth is we do have a right to self-experimentation. That's basically ingrained in us. We own our own selves. So the idea that you can take away, you may be able to make it difficult, but the fact that there's enough people out there that are a part of this subculture and community, I don't think it's going to stop us. I mean, I've said it a million times. I'm not the first guy to do this. I'm the first guy to bring it to the spotlight. But, people like Grindhouse Wetware, Tim Cannon, Ryan O'Shea, Rich Lee, all of these people came before me and they didn't ask permission, and these guys were basically bioencapsulating, LEDs and things that they could break out of other devices in 2-part epoxy and installing them in their garage. So do I think there should be regulation? I think there should be the ability. Oh, how do I want to put this? Because this is walking a very dangerous line. I can see why they would want regulation, but I don't see how they could have it. not without completely violating the one thing that I value more than anything else, and that's personal and individualized freedoms. As far as I'm concerned, and I mean no disrespect to any religion, faith, or philosophy by saying this. My grandmother used to tell me that my body was my temple. Well, I don't think that what I've done has disrespected my temple. I just put some paint on the walls and added some Wi-Fi. But I think that they will try, but I kind of see it the same way as back in the days of Napster, when they were like, we're going to stop file sharing.
Yeah.
They still ain't been able to do that.
Yeah. So I think we if we acknowledge that kind of this is certainly, you're in the minority right now, probably less than 1% of humans are augmented at this point. But I do think, and we've had conversations about this.
Well, before. Allow me to, I want to challenge that statement.
Sure. Go ahead.
Now, are you talking about selective augmentation, or are we also including all of the biomedical people that have augmentations that are part of some type of treatment?
It's a fair point. I would expect it's still pretty low, even with those that have, but I guess, but it is a good point. I would expect selective augmentation is probably much more percentage. In either case, I guess the question that I'm curious about is, what do you think? I do think that technological augmentation is going to be increasingly more prevalent in the future. But from your perspective, what do you think will really need to change in order to shift those scales, both in terms of technology to make it more accessible, and then also kind of societal perspectives as well?
Oh, honestly, it's going to be a matter of modifying what we would consider to be socially acceptable as well as morally ethical. We can look at certain procedures when it comes to the human body and go, those are considered elective surgery. We could go with rhinoplasty, breast augmentation, hair plugs, whatever these are considered cosmetic. What is not cosmetic is anything having to do with your brain, anything having to do with amputations.
So there's not elective cases that you mentioned.
Not within what I would consider to be westernized cultures. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure if you go somewhere, you could probably just walk in and pay somebody some money and say, numb me up, cut my arm off, and give me a stump, and they probably will. I mean, this is humanity, so I'm sure if you have enough money, you can get whatever you want. Yeah. But from an actual medical perspective, anything that would be considered in the brain, in any having to do with any organs, any type of removal of a limb outside of a medical necessity, those would be considered body dysmorphia or reckless endangerment. So first thing we have to do is, this is going to be a touchy one. And again, these are my opinions alone. These are not the opinions of Justin Hutchins or of the Cognition as a whole, but we are a faith-based society in a lot of ways. So currently, according to pretty much both large religions that are prevalent at this time, the idea of just cutting off body parts doesn't work, unless there's some type of medical reason. So we have to be able to look beyond what we've been brought up to from a cultural perspective and start looking at our bodies as more than just flesh and bone. Because I mean, that's one of my favorite examples of this is, if I was to walk in to my doctor tomorrow and say, I would like you to cut my hand off so I can get a new AI enabled, titanium hand. They will want to send me to psychiatric to figure out what is wrong with my brain to think, why would you want to get rid of a perfectly good hand?
Yeah.
But yet I can go in and put a piece of jewelry in my ear, put a piece of jewelry in my nose, and that's okay. We need to start looking beyond what we were born with and realize that we are capable of so much more, and accept that from a societal level before any type of large types of augmentation are going to happen. There was a movie I caught on Netflix a couple of weeks ago, and for the life of me, I can't remember the name of it. But essentially, it was the future of sports where the athletes were part bionic. And they had taken sports into this new level where, basketball players were jumping 4 stories to do a dunk. Track runners were using the speed, like NASCAR speedways.
Wow.
And the truth is, I do think we're going to get to that. I just don't know what's going to be the tipping point. There's going to have to be some type of augmentation that can be done on a grand scale that will be publicly accessible, usable in your daily life, that's going to actually be able to push the level of influence of the general populace to say, well, I don't want to do that, but okay, who cares? That's what it's going to take. And I just don't know what that's going to be. I was hoping that it would be the credit card.
So it almost sounds like kind of you think that there's going to be a specific use case that really becomes the catalyst that change people's minds.
I really do. Yeah. I really do, because this is a bit on the extreme, and I'm not going to pretend that it isn't, but it's not so far extreme if you can find an everyday use case that everybody can find a commonality to. I mean, take a look at what's going on in Sweden. The country of Sweden actually gave their citizens the ability to get a small RFID implant that almost, and I hate to say this, but almost like they do with lost pets. If these individuals are injured, they can quickly find the implant. They can find their record in the national database. They can get all of your medical information. And there was a great number of the population that actually took advantage of this. So much so that even once they actually had the implants, they were actually able to use a secondary NFC functionality, and they were allowed to put their metro keys, and the metro stations actually started accepting implant for payment. I feel very, very comfortable in Sweden. Most of the tourists that I saw that weren't. But it would take something like that we could all get behind and lose the stigma that is currently attached with this subculture.
Yeah, and honestly, that seems like a very sensible use case to me. If you think about the fact that if you're unconscious or you can't communicate who you are and kind of unique things related to the context of your own medical treatment, you could get the wrong treatment if they don't know who you are. And so something like that quickly can communicate those details about you without you having to even be aware that it's happening, does seem to have a lot of value. And I think we talked about this the other day when we did your launch party, the fact that you do kind of have a unique medical challenge yourself, that if anybody were to try to throw you in an MRI machine.
Oh yeah, my fear is, I know those damn MRIs are really, really expensive, and my luck, something would rip out, screw up the machine, and I'd be on the hook for like a $9 million machine on top of my hospital bill.
Yep. So so I think that actually makes a lot of sense. I think that having a specific use case probably will change people's minds. I think there also is the question of the technology itself. So I know that for some people, something like the size of like a grain of rice or something is very different than like what you have on the back of your hand.
Oh yeah.
So and there's also, like what we talked about in the intro, like the possibility of kind of future tech that is gel-based,
thinner,
rigid, and
yeah.
So.
And the funny thing is, when I was looking at that article on that Biogel, the first thing that ran through my head was, well, right after, damn, I should have waited a little while. This is going to make things so much easier. But the next thing that ran through my head was, I told people it would be 5 years, and people would look at me and think I'm arcane. I wonder if it's even going to be 5 years. The technology is just moving so fast. I just brought this book out, last week, and this week we now have flexible, stretchable, bioconductible membrane. Maybe I have a year before I'm obsolete. I don't know, but I mean, it's moving so fast.
Time for second edition in 6 months.
Yep. I'm going to have to take all these out and get version 2s.
Yep. All right. So if you could go back and give younger Lynn some advice at the early start of your hacking journey, what would you say to young Lynn?
Fortran's really not going to help you that much.
Yeah, that's fair.
I would definitely, because I remember at the time thinking this is amazing. This is the next big thing. I probably would also tell myself to buy stock in Microsoft and Google.
Yeah,
I'm pulling the complete Back to the Future thing right now. No, I would probably tell myself, believe in yourself a little bit more.
Yeah.
And
the challenge in cybersecurity in general is this imposter syndrome. And I think that, you have amazing knowledge and experience to offer, but I think for anybody that even has it's getting out of your own ways is a big challenge. So I can definitely empathize with it.
And I guess the other thing I would tell younger me is you are more than a collection of all of your mistakes.
Good advice.
I freely admit it, man. And if you've read the book, so I was pretty raw in my assessment of myself. I wasn't a good person. I wasn't a good father. I wasn't a role model for anybody. But I've definitely tried to make the second part of my life make up for some of the misgivings that I did in the beginning.
Yep. Yeah. And honestly, I think that's one of the things that I love about the book is it's, like I said, kind of early on, it's not just the technology, it's your redemption story. And I think that, again, coming back to what Wiley pointed out to you, you are the story that is one of the things that makes this book so incredible. So I guess anything you learned about yourself during the writing process? I mean, we've got probably about a year, I would assume, between writing, editing, and marketing.
Well, I learned that I need to go to school, go back, and I'm taking some online courses in how to actually write a book now that I'm an author. I figure I might want to learn how to do that. I learned that I like writing. I found it very cathartic to really go back and go through a lot of that. And I learned that I guess I'm a better storyteller than I thought I was.
Was there a routine or what went into getting everything out there? Did you set aside specific times? Was there?
Oh, well, honestly, this was my salvation. I did the majority of the writing of this during my recovery from my knee replacement surgery. So I was laid up in bed and I'm like, I'm not one of those people that can just sit and watch, daytime TV. I can't do it. I'm like, I need to do something. I need to get this energy out. So I literally sat from the time I woke up until the time I went to bed for about 3.5 months to get the majority of the first draft knocked out. And the funny thing was, as a first-time author, for anybody out there that's going to try this, all I can say is prepare to be humbled. Yeah. Because I'm like, this is amazing stuff. I am so great. This is so cool. And then the amount of red markup
when it comes back from the editors.
Oh my God. It looked like they killed some kind of cyber creature and it bled all over my Word doc. It was very humbling, but it was a really cool experience to go through. I don't know how many more nonfiction books I'm going to do because, well, the whole citation thing becomes a real pain in the neck.
It does.
I do find it funny that like one of the last pages of the book before you get into the index and everything in the back is like a quarter of a page of nothing but citations. It was like, it works. But you did a great job paving the way for me, man. I will forever be grateful for you making that introduction for me. It's opened up a whole new, chapter of my life that I had no idea. And I will say this, man, as somebody that's gone through book signings, I find it really funny. It just reminds me of like a never-ending mortgage.
Because you have to sign every page, and
yes, you got to sign everyone, and everybody wants something unique, and it's like, oh my God, that line is out the door. I'm grateful, but my hand hurts.
Yep. Yeah, for sure, I can get there. Well, I guess one thing that we should absolutely plug is there is a really cool new website in addition to the book.
Yes,
tell us
there
about
is. Well, just to make things a little bit easier and to try and help do a little bit more with my side work with the bios industry and a lot of my own personal research and the crazy shit I'm doing, I decided it was time for me to actually go ahead and get my own website. So I am the proud owner of www.i-am-machine.com. You can actually order the book directly from there. I'll also be posting all of my upcoming engagements. If you want to try and get an autograph book for me and you don't want to wait, I'll probably be putting up just a little store if you want. I'm not trying to make any money, but you're going to cover the shipping. Awesome. And this is where I'm doing my blog posts, any of the new upcoming media appointments that I have, podcasts, they'll all be posted there they won't be posted there, but there'll be links from there to get to where all of my content is. So did some really cool
it's polished, man. It looks awesome.
Yeah, I shout out to my nephew Brian. He's the one that actually hooked me up with that. He's the one that dealt with the developer for me, because let's be honest, I'm old school. I'm not a front end web developer. I know more about breaking into these things than I do about designing them.
Yep, for sure. I'm the same way. I don't want to touch HTML and CSS. So
nope.
And it's you can create things like what your website looks like is amazing to me. It's art. So.
And one last thing for all of you, if you want to get the full effect of my website, you cannot look at it in mobile. Mobile, it looks cool, but you need that full screen view on an actual monitor to get the actual full layout, not the Mobi, and it is really cool.
Yep. So definitely check that out. I-am-human.com.
No, I am not human. I am machine.
I am machine. Wow, I botched that one, huh?
Now, I know we're getting to the end of the episode here, Hutch, but I have a philosophical question for you.
All right. Yeah.
How am I? Every time I go and have to deal with a CAPTCHA, am I lying?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there is a line which I don't know if we've clearly defined, because it's an interesting question. And I think what becomes more interesting as we get more technologically augmented, the line between human and machine gets even blurrier.
Absolutely.
I don't have an answer. I don't know. Do you feel like you're lying whenever you click the box?
Well, considering I can't actually break rules and laws anymore, in the back of my head, I do kind of go, I'm not human, but I'm lying. I'm not human, but I'm lying.
Some amount of satisfaction to it.
Yeah, it's about all I can do anymore. I'm not going back to jail, and I like this side of the fence a lot nicer. I get much better accommodations.
Yep, there you go. Well, I guess my last question: what is next, Lynn? I know you're going around traveling a lot, having conversations. Is there another book in the future? Is there any?
There is multiple books in the future. I'm currently working on an outline that I will be co-authoring with my, oh God, I don't even know how to put, I don't want to say associate, because the dude is just so much more than that, to honestly, I'm getting the opportunity to do a co-authorship with one of my mentors and one of the people I highly respect, Dr. Gregory Carpenter. And we're going to be taking a look at the human identity from all sides. And I'm also working on a couple of fictional novels. I'm getting up there in my years. Don't get me wrong. I still got many a good years of running left, but the idea of running the way I have been, I just don't think I want to do that until I'm 70. So I think I want to become like the Tom Clancy of hacker fiction. So for all of our listeners who, we're all pissed off that there's no really good hacking, fiction novels out there, I might just have to fill that slot. But beyond that, I'm not going to get into too many details because we're not ready to release it yet. But I can tell you this much. There is probably going to be some videos made for a large production where yours truly is going to be the main point of discussions. I'm not going to get into too much because this is going to be a co-release between us and another group. And let's just say that you might be able to see me on a big screen here in Q1 of next year as myself.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, looking forward to it. All right.
So with that, I am still Len, always will be. Thank you very much, Hutch, for this amazing opportunity to talk about the book. You can't tell you how much your friendship and partnership means to me. And for those of you that are willing to go out and try my book, give Justin's a shot as well. Like I said earlier, it's called The Language of Deception, Weaponizing AI. And this is what we're up against from that perspective. So I'll take you into the future, and Justin's going to give you the gods that are going to take us out.
Yeah, it's an excellent partnership. All right. Well, I appreciate it, Lynn. Thanks to all the listeners. Definitely pick you up a copy of Human Hacked. It will be well worth it. With that, Cybercognition over and out.
Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Cybercognition podcast with Hutch and Len, part of the ITSP Magazine Podcast Network. If you like the story, add this show to your favorite podcast player and share the Cybercognition podcast with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to connect your brand to this show and its audience, visit itspmagazine.com to learn how to sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey.